make sure to give Connor Hickey your CISA number so that you get Learning Link credits as well as continue your membership with EPN. For those of you on the phones, please email Connor Hickey, his name is spelled CONORHICKEY, with your CISA number to be able to get Learning Link credits for being here. So as we get started, we have Steve Cantor. He is the current team lead on the CCC. He's been in his position for about 2 years now. Outside of work, he is a proud father of 2 boys, Axel and David, one of whom it looks like is with us today. As well as husband to the wonderful Stephanie Cantor. Both inside and outside of work, he operates as the CEO, the Chief Energy Officer. So without further ado, please welcome Steve Cantor.
I'm going to give you the answer to the question, but what I need from you is to say it loud and at the same time as the person next to you, all right? So the first question is going to be, what are we going to do? All right? The answer is going to be dominate. So let's go through that. What are we going to do? Dominate! All right, here we go. The next question is, how are we going to do it? All right? So the answer is attitude, effort, execution. And I want to give a big clap, all right? Here we go. Let's go through that one. How are we going to do it?
Attitude, effort, execution.
All right, let's put it together. Here we go. What are we going to do?
Dominate.
How are we going to do it?
Attitude, effort, execution.
Thank you, thank you. Please be seated. Nothing like starting off with a chant of some sort, right? Get our juices going. Help us lock in a little bit. All right, so I appreciate the opportunity. Let me first and foremost say that about EPN. This is 2 years running. I've had an opportunity to come up here and share a message. So honored at that opportunity. Not something I don't take very lightly. So I am prepared and ready to deliver something that hopefully some of you can take with you. It'll be useful for your current role, maybe something down the road as well. And then also thank you to you guys spending an hour with us. Obviously eating your lunch, and hopefully I'm able to share something that you can take, apply, and improve. All right. So the title of the presentation. So I wanted to go with the purpose-driven life, but my wife had to remind me that's already the title of a bestseller. So I settled with and came up with Take Aim, living with intent, and then lessons in leadership, motivation, and sacrifice. All right. So all of those topics I feel like I have credibility to speak on, and I'm hoping that I deliver it in that way to you today. All right. So moving on. Agenda. We're going to talk briefly about my background, really ages 1 to 35. Some of you have heard some of those things. It'll be a more concise version, and also talk about a few different points that I feel like have helped me get to the point that I am today. And then we'll go into the content, right? The non-boring stuff. Platforms. We all have one. All right? Leadership. I'm going to talk specifically about one leadership principle that I'm passionate about, that I've come across over the years, and I think it may help leaders in the room, but also people that aspire to be leaders as well. All right? Motivation, always a popular topic. It'll address folks that are motivating and also being motivated. All right? And then last but not least, talent is overrated. So that is the title of a book, and we'll talk a little bit about the sacrifice that goes into mastering any skill, etc. Right? And then I'll open it for questions, and also have some recommendations and resources at the end that hopefully you can take with you and maybe explore more and learn, and then maybe we can have some dialogue. All right? So, got some pictures here. I did change up some of the other pictures, but I don't have a lot of the ones of me as a youngster lying around at this point. So, I'm one of 2 boys born to our family in Virginia Beach, Virginia. My brother's 3 years older than me. And my life started out probably very similar to many of you in the room. Born to 2 parents. And then it took a little bit of a turn. At 3 years old, my parents got divorced. So, like the statistics show in this country, obviously that's happened quite a bit, right? And so I witnessed some things that I still have vivid memories of some abuse that took place in my home. So it's amazing what you can remember at age 3. I'm standing here 32 years later, and I remember quite a bit of that. So parents out there, be careful, right? Your kids are sponges. They certainly hang on to all the things that you do or say. And so we ended up, my mom had the courage and the the toughness really to get us out of that negative situation. And I actually vividly remember us leaving in the middle of the night. And so the next few years were a struggle, right? From age 3 to 5 or so, they were a struggle. You had a single parent, so you had a single income home with 2 kids, and there was oftentimes my mom was on a diet, right? So I find out a few years later that that was because we didn't really have enough money for all of us to eat. So my mom, of course, we were going to eat, not her. And we also had to deal with the visitation drama, right? Any of you that have come from a home that may have broken up and you're sharing time with each parent, my brother and I were left disappointed quite often. My dad would make promises to take us to a game or the circus, etc., and it just didn't happen. So my mom was there to kind of pick up the pieces, and I learned a lot from her. So things improved drastically over the next few years. My mom remarried, so now you have a dual income home. No one was missing any meals. We were in good shape there. But we always were a blue-collar home, right? Neither one of my parents had higher education. So my dad was an electrician, so he's always doing a lot of side jobs. My mom worked 2 jobs. So that really was the foundation that really built the foundation for me as far as just going above and beyond, right? Working as much as I needed to in order to be successful. So I was able to learn that at home. That behavior was modeled at home, which was I'm very thankful for. Now, most of the male influences in my life ended up being coaches. Like my stepdad was a good guy, but he was a beta. He really wasn't like a tough guy. He wasn't somebody I emulated and looked up to and wanted to be like. I emulated those coaches, those guys that really had invested some time into me. And so I ended up learning a ton from those guys about accountability, hard work, toughness, etc. So it really set me on a path to become a coach. That was what I wanted to do because they had invested so much time into me, whether it was rides home from practice, additional work on weekends, things like that. So I said, wow, what an impact you're able to make from that position. Why don't I do that? I like sports, passionate about it, why don't I be a coach? So I kind of started on that path, and through that time, I made a lot of sacrifices. I spent a lot of time working on becoming a better athlete. I was an okay student. If I had to go back, I would do a lot better in school just because I know more now, right? And so I ended up working very hard, making some sacrifices in my social life in order to turn myself into a halfway decent athlete. Ended up at Virginia Tech, so fast forward here. Ended up having an opportunity to play football at Virginia Tech. Played for a Hall of Fame coach, Coach Frank Beamer. He just retired this year after this past season. So that was kind of, obviously it was a great experience. I wasn't a phenomenal player, but I held my own. And I built a reputation there as a guy that was a hard worker, somebody that was willing to sacrifice, that was dedicated, loyal, etc. So they identified me as a guy that might make a decent football coach. I said, well, that was kind of where my alignment was anyway from my previous experience. So I said, okay, great. So I had an opportunity to stay on there after I got done playing as a graduate assistant. So many of you may be familiar with the graduate assistant process. They pay for your school and then they work you 1,000,000 hours, right? It's cheap labor. So, but that was the early education really into coaching. Hey, what it was going to be like, what's the sacrifice, the hours that you have to work, etc. So all it did was continue to build onto that foundation that I already had from my mom and some of these other guys that influenced me about working hard. So fast forward into really that 2004 is when my coaching career started. I had about a 10-year coaching career. Fortunate during that time I met my wife in Virginia Beach, and I've got my 2 boys here. I got David up there at the top. So I had an opportunity to coach for 10 seasons. And there was a lot of ups and downs. There was a couple championship seasons in there, and there was one that we didn't win a game, right? There was a lot of, I had a lot of influence and impact on a lot of student athletes, which was great. I was thrust into a leadership position pretty quickly. I was the youngest head football coach in the state of Virginia when I took over as the head high school coach at Lansdowne High School in 2006. So I had to learn a lot about leading people pretty quickly. You got to mature quickly when you've got guys in their 40s on your coaching staff. You've got a guy that coached you in middle school and high school, and now he works for you, right? So you have to have some answers. I got thrust into that role pretty quickly. And so really ended up at University of Rhode Island for 2012 and 13, and we didn't win enough. So we got fired, right? Hopefully it's the last time I ever get fired, but if it's not, we'll overcome and figure something out, right? But it was an experience that I had to battle back from. So I had an opportunity to join Schneider Electric. You know, I'm indebted to those guys that brought me in here. That was, you know, a great experience. Came into the January new hire class. A lot of talented folks still here, right, that were in that class. And I'm pointed at you too, Caleb. Don't get all sensitive. And so, a lot of great people in that class. I did the role for about 2 months, and then I was in the right place at the right time. So Tom Myers, who's my current boss, he was a team leader at the time. He was elevated to his role. Leanne Johnson was one of the team leaders. She moved over into inside sales leadership. So really, I was in the right place at the right time, had some previous experience, and I moved into the team leader role. So I've been here for 2 years in that role. So I've been with the company for about 2.5 years. I started May 1st of 2014 as the team leader. I'm now a sales supervisor. Hey, the title changed, but the importance hasn't, right? So here I am having 2 years of experience, hired a ton of guys that are, you know, folks that are sitting in this room, had an opportunity to bring in some talented folks that really have just made us look good for the last 2 years, and I've been very appreciative of all the hard work that many of you have done. So it's been a gratifying experience, had a great opportunity to network with a ton of great people and have a little bit of an impact and influence. So enough about me, let's move into the content. All right, so platforms. Everybody has one. Let's talk about the definition of what I consider the platform, right? Because if you look it up in the dictionary, you're not getting that definition, okay? So what we're talking about is talents and skills, maybe your current role, but what makes the difference is your opportunity for influence or impact. That's your platform, right? Whether it's over one or whether it's an influence and a platform over many, whether it's 100, etc., right? So I couldn't talk about platforms without it bringing me to what some of you, if you're a believer, you may be familiar with the parable of talents that's in the Bible. We talk about the book of Matthew, chapter 25, talk about the parable of talents. So just a real quick recap of the parable. You've got a master, and he's got 3 servants. So the master is going on a trip. So he's going to leave these talents with his servants. So he takes the first servant, he gives him 5 talents. He gives him no direction on how to use it, no timeline on when he's going to be back. He just says, hey, good luck, you got 5 talents. Takes the next servant, he gives him 2. Same thing, no direction on how to use it, no timeline on when he's going to be back. All right? And then he takes the third one, and he gives him 1 talent. Same thing, no direction, no timeline. All right? So the master leaves, and immediately the servant with 5 talents, he gets to work. He starts wheeling and dealing, and he's able to turn those 5 talents into 5 additional talents. So now he's got 10 total, right? Now you take the servant with 2. He was given 2 talents. Same thing, he got to work. He started grinding. He's wheeling and dealing. He turns those 2 talents into 2 additional talents. Now he has 4 total. The third servant who had 1, he did nothing. He took no action. He actually buried his talent, right, out of fear. So he did nothing with it. So the master comes back, and of course the guy with 5, now he has 10 talents, right? The one with 4, who started with 2, they're happy to report back. They come running up to the master. Hey, master, I was able to turn these 5 talents into 10. And he said, outstanding. You're a loyal servant. You're dedicated, committed to the cause. You took a small role that I gave you, turned it into something great. Here's some additional land. Here's some additional responsibility, right? The servant with the 4 total, same thing. He comes running up to the master. Hey, master, I was grinding while you were gone. Here you go. I turned it into 4. He said, outstanding job. You're loyal, you're dedicated. Here's some additional land. I know I only left you with a little, but you made the most of it. Here you go. Here's some additional responsibility. And then the last guy, he comes moseying up. The last servant with 1 who had buried his has nothing to report back, right? And the servant says, all right, the master says, you're lazy. You're no good. You did nothing with it. You didn't take action at all with the talent that I left you. You're fired. He banished him from the facility, right? Fired him. So what did we learn? So what we learned was now you have a small role. You may have a small platform, yet the folks that have a small platform, when they utilize that and they're able to multiply, right, their influence, their impact, they're given additional responsibility. The master never gave the guy a promise that if he did anything with the 5 talents that he would give him more, but those guys that got the 2 talents and the 5, what did? They started grinding, they put their nose to the grindstone, and they were able to multiply their influence, their impact, those talents, and then the master rewarded them with that, right? So think about that in your current role. So then the guy, of course, the guy with 1 talent, he buried it, he did nothing with it, and they fired him. So be careful, right? So the message is, hopefully you're utilizing the platform that you've been given and you're able to multiply that influence and that impact, right? So we'll talk a little bit about common reasons that they're wasted. Worrying about other people's platforms. We've all been guilty of it, right? But many of us sit here and say, we've got a good job, but of course we're always looking and say, hey, why am I not the on-site guy up in Chicago? Why am I not the DM in the New England territory? Why am I not the team leader, right, on the CCC? Oftentimes we sit there. I know I was guilty as a position coach. I would say, man, why am I not running the offense? I only got 4 guys in my room. I'm making an impact. I'm doing a decent job. But what if I had, 35 or 40 guys to oversee? Man, I could make an impact. What if I was a head coach? Oh, I'd be dealing with boosters. I could make such an impact. I could do more. But that's not my current role. That wasn't my platform at the time. So don't miss out on that opportunity to actually make an impact in the role that you're in, right? Because you're worried about somebody else's platform. Next reason, operating out of fear. So a lot of people underperform on purpose because of the fear of the expectation that they'll establish, right? So for an example, every time I get an opportunity to speak, and every time I stand up here, the bullseye gets bigger, right? The expectation for me grows. I can't walk into work like this during the day. Everybody's going to say, what happened to him? Right? Because why? Because I come in every day with a smile, with energy, enthusiasm, etc., whether I'm faking it or not, right? So understand the expectation grows. Well, what happens when you hit President's Club? Oh man, they're going to expect me to do it all the time. What happens when you hit your 100% club or whatever other awards they give out? Right? Now expectations grow. So a lot of people underperform because they don't want to take on that responsibility. Right? When my second son, our second son Axel was born, I said, congratulations, David, leadership opportunity. You're the oldest, right? Congratulations, battlefield promotion, son. Because now that's your platform, right? So take a look at your current platform, and we'll talk about how do you apply this, right? Self-evaluation. You may say, Steve, my job is not a leadership position. It's not this, it's not that. Well, do you have a younger brother or sister? Are you the cool uncle that could have some impact or influence? Right? What are you doing in those roles in your life outside of work or even at work that you could be making an impact? You could be using your platform for the good of the team or someone else, right? Maybe you're the most senior or tenured consultant in a pod. You're probably the source of knowledge, right? Are you utilizing that, or are you saying, I'm too busy, right? I'm too busy to help somebody that's a little bit younger than me or less tenured. Right? So keep all those things in mind as you look at your life with your platforms and things that you've been given. And then change the question. So the important part is, don't ask, why am I not? Why am I not this? Why am I not the team leader? You should be asking yourself, how can I become? Right? So change the question. How can I become the team leader? How can I become the DM in the New England territory? So are you now setting up meetings with the correct people? Are you approaching your job the right way in order to get you to that? Don't be a victim and say, why am I not? Right? Change the question. How can I become? Is everybody with me? All right, so leadership. So always a popular topic, right? Whether you are a leader, whether you aspire to become one, we're all being led by someone, right? None of us, I'm the CEO, Chief Energy Officer. I'm not running this place, right? So we all have a boss. We all have someone we answer to. Right? And leaders come in all shapes and sizes, all forms, okay? But I read up a ton on leadership. It's something that was on my mind I wanted to be able to share, and I will talk about how to apply this even if you're not in a leadership role as well. So, team dynamics. I want to talk about the 10-80-10 leadership principle, all right? So, and you may be a leader sitting in a room and say, I'm not sure my team breaks down like that. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. You would be surprised when you do your evaluation. when we start talking here. So it's a fairly common leadership principle, and it divides up your team or categorizes your team based on performance and other factors, right? So your top 10%. Most of us hope that we're sitting in that top 10%, right? You're dedicated, you're loyal, you're a high performer. Your boss would feel great about handing you the keys to the kingdom, right? You're getting it done, all right? And maybe you're getting performance enhancers given to you at award ceremonies or whatever, right? Because you're balling. Then you have your middle 80%. This is probably going to be the bulk of your team. You've got an 80%. These are good performers. They may just not be the highest or the greatest performers, right? Sometimes the knock on them is they rarely separate themselves from the guy next to them. They kind of all just do their job, right? They seldom complain. And then the thing you have to be worried about with the bulk of your team is they can be swayed one way or the other. And I'll come back to that in a second. And then you got your bottom 10, which most of us are hoping we stay out of that, right? You're malcontent, you're the negative guy, below standard performer, probably doing just enough to keep your job. No one's guilty of that in this room, all right? So, like I mentioned here with the middle 80%, you can be swayed one way or the other based on a lot of factors, but mainly for team culture. So if you have this team, what's your culture like? And be careful that your middle 80%, the bulk of your team, is not swayed in the wrong direction, right? So there's a few quotes that I always have up here. I've read these quotes, read up on them, or used them in football, come across them. But if you permit it, you promote it. So many of you leaders, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you permit certain behaviors, you're basically promoting it to the rest of your team. So you have to be careful. If you're okay with this person coming in late, then be careful that the rest of your team doesn't start to one tardy here, and then they start pulling the rope a little bit and going further and further, right? And then it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. So along the same lines, I can stand up here and give a great speech to a team and about how high performing we're going to do. You know, we're gonna rock it, we're going to be extremely high performing, but if I'm tolerating subpar performance, the rest of all that talk goes out the window. Right? So keep that in mind if you're a leader now, or maybe you aspire to be one. It's not what you preach, it's what you're tolerating. Now, common leadership mistake. Allocation of time. Allocation of time. Many of the leaders in the room sat through the Aslan training, right? And broke it into quadrants and how you're supposed to spend your time. Right? Well, in regards to the 10-80-10, the biggest, one of the most common mistakes is you spend all your time praising your top 10, right? High fives, chest bumps, whatever it is, however you celebrate and praise these guys, right? And then you spend the other bulk of your time with your bottom 10%. Whether it's you reprimanding them, verbal warnings, sitting there next to them, trying to hold their hand, get them into the office on time, texting them extra, hey, come on, get it together, right? You spend a lot of time. Who's the bulk of your team? The middle 80%. And they feel like a little bit ignored. They're kind of the lost sheep, right? A little bit ignored, and now they can be swayed one way or the other. So you have to be careful that you don't ignore them to the point where they get swayed to the bottom 10%. Can all of us agree that if we had a higher percentage of top performers, we'd be a better team, right? Most of us would acknowledge that. So here's some applications for any type of leadership. Evaluate and categorize your team. That's one thing I think we did a great job of in college athletics was we brought people in on scholarship. That means they're your investment, right? Much like the folks sitting in this room. We pay for you to be here. We pay you a salary to be here. You're our investment. Your people are what make up your team, right? So we evaluated at college athletics, we used to evaluate personnel every single day. So I feel like we had a pretty good idea on who was the top performer, who wasn't, etc. So, and some managers or leaders do a great job of that here, and some may not. Maybe they don't know the importance just yet. But I encourage you to evaluate and categorize your team and find out where do I need to spend some time, who needs to be swayed to the top 10%, etc. Do not alienate your bottom 10%. Now, I think there's two ways to look at it. Your bottom 10%, you may be in a situation where you're saying, you know what, I'm going to manage this guy out. He's a headache. He's somebody I don't want to deal with. I'm going to manage him out. Okay, then maybe you're going to alienate that guy. But that's typically not the case. Most of us don't have that type of freedom to manage someone out like that. We invested in them for a reason. They had some skills that we were looking for, right? So now it's our job to bring them along into the middle 80%. Rarely are they going to go from the bottom 10 to the top 10. They might have the talent, but they probably have a negative attitude. Some of those things aren't going to change overnight. So it's our job to not alienate them. Give them some responsibility within your team. Right? So one of the great examples that we used when I was a college football coach was we used to take that group, and again, some of them were talented guys. They weren't good dudes, right? They weren't good people. They were a little negative, and they just weren't hard workers, not great effort, etc. But what we used to do is we put a group of them together, and we put them in charge of selecting the uniforms for the games, right? So a lot of guys care about that stuff, apparel and all that, but that's a non-business critical decision that you're able to give a group of people that may not be your high performers. We weren't going to win or lose a game based on wearing green pants or gold jersey, etc., right? We weren't going to lose. That wasn't going to affect our performance. But it could affect the performance of a guy that's in the bottom 10 when he says, hey, I now have ownership over apparel. I'm making a significant decision on what we do. Coaches including us in that decision-making process. Think about the boost to your ego a little bit if maybe you are a low performer. Maybe in here you're saying, I'm kind of at the bottom right now, maybe no one asked me for my opinion, and then all of a sudden you have some decision-making power. Think about the boost to your performance that could happen, right? So keep that in mind, leaders, when you have a group of people that are slight underperformers, let's figure out a way we can keep them in the loop and not alienate them. Elevate your middle 80%. So again, I've always felt like you have your high performers, whether it's 10% of your team, maybe it's higher, hopefully, that means you're crushing it, right? It may be slightly less. But I believe you have to facilitate some opportunities for your high performers to elevate the performance of your middle 80, right? So you have to, whether it's some sort of mentor-mentee relationship, you don't want to put an overburden on your high performer. He's a high performer because he's working hard at his own job, right? So maybe you have him share his best practices in a team meeting setting. Maybe you invite him to perform or present at the Elevate session, right? So he can share his best practices and how he approaches his daily job or his life habits with the entire group. And maybe it moves the needle on somebody that's in the middle 80. So a great example of that, many of you may know who Urban Meyer is. Urban Meyer was the head coach at the University of Florida for a little while. Now he's the head coach at Ohio State University. He's got 3 national championships as a college football coach. And one of the things that he coached Tim Tebow at Florida, right? And he said they would run out to practice next to each other, and he'd say, Tim, who are we going to get today? And they were referring to 80%ers, right? That middle 80. He'd say, Tim, who are we going to get? Because clearly Tim Tebow was in the top 10%, right? He was a high performer, did everything right. So he and his coach had this connection on who are we going to bring into that top 10% today? That was their goal on every day, right? Another example that Urban Meyer used is he's got these top 10%, these high performers. During the season, a lot of times those guys, people want to lift in the mornings to get it done and not lift in the afternoon. Majority of the team lifts in the afternoon. He told those high performers, said, you're not allowed in the weight room in the morning. I said, Coach, why? What's going on? Like, I get here on time. He said, unless you bring somebody from the middle 80%, you got to bring them with you. If you bring them with you, you can come in the weight room. If you don't, I'm wasting my opportunity to have you influence a team. There's a reason every team you've ever been on had a team captain, right? They probably were the high performer. Maybe it was a popularity contest or whatever it was, but they brought something to the table to be voted captain, right? So think about the impact that would make is if your high performers are always out in front of some of those folks that are in your middle 80, I believe you can elevate the performance of your middle 80%. And again, once that top 10% turns into top 20, that means we've got a pretty good team. We've got a lot of high performers. Application for the employee. You say, Steve, I'm not a manager. Talk to me a little bit. All right, great. So find out where you rank. Have that conversation. Any leader should be able to give you where you rank and feedback on why, right? They shouldn't be afraid to give you that feedback that you need. So find out where you rank. Find out where they find you. Where do they see you? Hey, you're in the middle 80%. You've got to elevate your game. Well, what can I do, right? Great. What can I do? So ask yourself, who's my target? So your target's probably your manager. Okay? What do they value, and how do I demonstrate it? So ask yourself that. So why not have a conversation with your manager and say, hey, how are you evaluated? How's your performance evaluated? Well, it's outbound calling, it's revenue, it's leads. Okay, great. What are you going to be good at? Outbound calling, revenue, leads. Because we all know right now, sitting in this room, that if you're making your manager look good, their opinion of you and your performance probably elevates. Am I right? Absolutely. So find out how they're evaluated, what do they value, and how you can demonstrate that. All right, and attack those areas. Any question on leadership at all before I move on? All right, so motivation. So always an interesting topic, at least to me. And I know everybody's motivated just a little differently. I get it. I mean, I send out a motivational or inspirational email every day, and some of you get it in your inbox and you delete it right away. Right? It happens. There's some folks aren't motivated by people's quotes or words or videos. That's fine, right? And some people are. I get emails back, great one today. You know, people read it and they're motivated by it. Outstanding. That's why I do it, right? But there's parts of motivation that we have to keep in mind and try to tailor our ability to motivate to the specific consultant that's on our team, or manager if you're a manager of managers, right? So there was a book that I read, and a few of you in the room I know have read it because it was a recommendation of mine and we've discussed it, but it was a book called Lead for God's Sake, right? And quick summary of the book, you've got a high school basketball coach, highly successful, and he starts to feel the pressure to win, right? He had one bad season, they had some injuries or whatever the year before, and all of a sudden they're like the favorite going into the year. And he starts feeling the pressure to win, and now he is modeling the wrong behaviors. He's doing a lot of blaming of his team, saying there's no leadership, he's knocking over coolers during practice and things. Really, he has no discipline for himself anymore either. And he's kind of lost his way on how to motivate his players, but also really why he coaches. So he's got a buddy down the road that he spends some time with, probably the worst thing for him, right? He spends some time with a guy who's a CEO. And he was the CEO of a company that once was thriving, and now all of a sudden it's plummeting, and the guy can't figure it out. He doesn't know how to motivate his people, and they're both struggling badly. And then the book kind of ends with, of course, the unlikely guy to help is the school janitor, right? And he comes through and he's got a ton of wisdom. He used to have a different position prior to being the janitor and so on and so forth. But it is a good read, I recommend it, right? But that's not the part of the story I wanted to touch on. So they started sharing this motivational technique and leadership technique for motivating employees. And they talked about the hatchet and the treasure, right? So many of you can imagine what the hatchet is. So the hatchet is the fear of losing your job, right? So whether it's threats, whether it's corrective action plans, etc., right? Or no playing time if you're an athlete, right? And then the treasure, as you may know, is probably money, you know, whether it's Southwest points for Chelsea, all right? So whatever it may be, or playing time if you're the athlete, right? So that's the treasure. And they say, that's how you motivate people. It's one or the other, right? And many of us may be motivated by that. I'd take a couple extra zeros at the end of my check. I would, right? But the one thing they missed on was the heart, right? They talked